Welcome, everybody. We're so glad to see you. And we move to our first guest speaker, and that is Casey Fromson. Casey, hello there. I see you there on the screen. We're so happy to have you here. And she is going to give us an update on some really exciting news take off here.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I'll pull up some slides and kind of zip through them, and I'm happy to have them shared afterwards for anyone that's interested in having them. What I'll be focused on is the Caltrain Electrification project, and you guys will all get a pretty deep dive on that. And then I'll just have one slide on kind of what's in store for the bus electrification side, and happy to spend more time in a future meeting talking about that. But you can see that both projects and entities kind of have major plans around electrification. So go ahead and get started. As I said, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly, but feel free to know that these are coming later towards you. So as a reminder of Caltrain corridor, it's 77 miles all the way from San Francisco down to Gilroy. And the section that we're going to be electrifying is from San Francisco to San Jose. We do expect a decent amount of growth in the future, a 40% population increase. And that's why we need to be planning for the future and improvements and modernization of the system. As part of that kind of future vision, the Caltrain board had adopted a 2040 service vision, and it really shows that we could run enough trains in the future to have 5-point capacity that we carry on the trains. And this really is a transformational moment for the railroad. You can see that the railroad's been around for 150 years. It actually started out as a steam system. It's been diesel, and this is the moment that we're going to electrify and will be in place for several decades to come. So you're all here to witness something really important that's happening on the corridor that's going to be in place in the next 2 years. Caltrain doesn't just connect the Caltrain corridor. You might have heard there's other projects in San Francisco that will be an underground connection to the Salesforce Center that would bring Caltrain and high-speed rail in there. High-speed rail would be on the exact same corridor as well. There's major projects for grade separation, so separating the tracks from the railroad. And then in San Jose, there's some efforts for a redesigned entity there. So it's really a corridor that's connecting many different entities. And then the BART extension will be connecting into San Jose as well. So in not too distant future, there really will be a whole ring around the bay of rail. A little bit of details about the electrification project. It's a 25 kV overhead contact system. So the exact same system that's being built in the Central Valley for high-speed rail is the system we're going to have in place on the Caltrain corridor. So they'll be able to use the same infrastructure. And this is going to be the first time in kind of the broader west of the US that a system has gone from diesel to electric. And it's the first time in the entire country in about 30 years that any system has done this. So this isn't something that happens very often. It's a pretty major undertaking, a lot of coordination, especially for a system like ours, where it's an active railroad, the trains are running, and we're putting in the infrastructure on top of it. So it really is, a big deal and not easy to do. And this project's going to replace about 75% of the diesel fleet with electric fleet, but we have plans in the future to have it fully electrified. The timeline construction started in 2017. Throughout a pandemic, we've been working, and we're right around the corner now for electrified service. We've hit some pretty major milestones, and if you've looked at the corridor, you should see that poles and wires are up. And so those will all be complete by the end of this year. The wires will be strung then at the end of next year. And again, passengers will be able to ride this in 2024. The trains have arrived on the corridor. This is what they look like. And we're going to have events this fall for everyone to be able to get on them, check them out, and really see for yourself what a new system we're going to have. Some of the benefits, there's a lot of safety, key benefits from it, the technology we're using, kind of the experience. I know this group very much cares about sustainability and energy independence. So you can imagine we have lots of details behind having a really old 30-year-old diesel trains and having them now brand new electric trains running on much cleaner energy. And we've kind of quantified what a difference, especially for the communities along the corridor. Again, some of the details behind that sustainability, equity is a part of this as well. And so you can see on here some of the disadvantaged communities and how we're going to be creating a cleaner environment for communities right alongside the corridor. We're also we've already changed our schedule to improve the midday and off-peak service. And when we electrify and we have the performance attributes to change it even more, The project also touches states across the country. So even though it's being built in California, the supply chain touches 36 different states. It's pretty impressive. One of the big ones we like to highlight too is in Utah, where there's a whole facility that was able to be built with the guarantee of a contract for us. As a rider, you can expect to see a lot of changes as well. You're going to see new display signs on there, power sources, storage, Wi-Fi, even baby changing tables in the bathroom. So it's going to feel a lot different than what you have today. And I think people will appreciate that. I have just one other slide, and then the Samtrans side. And so, you know, the Samtrans serves all of San Mateo County. There's a state mandate for all the fleets to be converted by 2040. The Caltrain board is on just voted to be on track to have that full conversion in place by 2034. And, you know, again, who we serve and where we go on the Samtrans side is pretty significant. We have some details here about kind of the average Samtrans rider and how important it is for us to make progress on this side. There's certainly a lot of new challenges that everyone's working on through the technology, the buses, and also the infrastructure putting it in place. And this is something that's facing transit systems throughout California. So we're all working on this together and excited about that future. And again, this is about the people. That's why we're doing it, not just the fun trains and buses. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions if you want to do that now or save it towards the end.
Wonderful, Casey. Thank you for that really fast update on what I know is just such a huge project. And you attend lots of council meetings, I imagine, still to update people and get questions. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're still out in the world, and I did my best to do it fast because I know you have some other speakers, but happy to dive into any details that people may have about the project.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very, very much. Christine, I guess, are you back on? I think that you might be, but I don't see you. Yes, there you are. Hi there.
And I wanted to thank all of you and just remind you to please, put yourself on mute. So I guess Adina from Seamless Bay Area is next. And Kristen, you can, oh, hold on, I think I saw a hand. So I think Chris Florowski, you had a question, so feel free to ask your question.
Yeah, I was wondering if there was an impact to the timeline for the electrification from the fire at the South San Francisco station.
There is not. We're still on track, but thanks for paying attention to what's happening on the corridor.
And are you planning to involve the public at all in some of the electrification testing?
We wouldn't be involving the public in the testing. I think the public will be able to see that the trains are out there. Where we will have kind of the first public involvement in the upcoming project is when we have these trains, and we're going to take them around to different stations and let the public come on the trains and experience them and kind of join us in the excitement. Before we do that, we have involved the public, and Adina knows well, we've spent many hours on the design of the train. So actually the colors of the train behind me were picked by members of the public. We had discussions about kind of what the interior would look like, of what kind of combination of cars there would be. We had the ADA community come out and give us feedback on, and we had a little model bathroom of kind of where, handholds would be. So, the public's been a part of the process, but I think it really is going to feel much more real in the coming months when people can actually step onto the train. And I know that I've worked on this project now for 10 years. And when I rode the trains for the first time, where they're being tested at 110 miles per hour, it was really gratifying to actually be physically on the train. And I know some of you have been along for the ride as well. So it is coming soon to everyone's front doors and communities.
Yeah, I'm asking because I had a rather terrifying experience disembarking with my bicycle off of a train. And so I think shaking some things out might be helpful. Thanks.
Absolutely.
I think I want to pass it back on to you, Kirsten, and you can introduce our second speaker.
I wanted to introduce Adina Levin. Adina, we're so happy to have you here. Yeah. And she has been working diligently and with her heart and soul on transportation issues in this area for, I think, decades now. Oh, my internet connection is unstable. So she's executive director of Friends of Caltrain, and she also contributes to a variety of local and regional advisory boards. And we're really happy to have her here.
What I'm going to say, Casey really gave that Caltrain backdrop, and so I'll talk about things that are complementary to what Casey said. So with the Friends of Caltrain hat, the mission is a stable funding and successful modernization of Caltrain in the context of a regionally integrated public transportation system that's accessible to all. And it was in the interest of that second part of that mission statement that I also co-founded Seamless Bay Area. Seamless Bay Area is a nonprofit focused on achieving an equitable, world-class, seamlessly integrated public transportation network. And part of the Caltrain's mission in the business plan service vision that Casey talked about is having better connections, which can help increase transit ridership. Even before the pandemic, there was a need for greater transit ridership to be the backbone of our transportation, and it wasn't keeping up with the need even before the pandemic. And more people want to use public transportation than can conveniently, because it's has historically taken too long, is insufficiently frequent, is confusing, and doesn't go where people want to go conveniently. And this is really gets in the way of our climate change goals, equity goals addressing inequality, housing affordability, having more places that people can affordably live. And one of the problems, not the only, but one of the significant issues here is the fragmentation of the system, where we have 27 different transit agencies in the Bay Area that have not been historically sufficiently well connected, and the challenges of COVID made those issues even more of a challenge. And so the difference between this slide and the previous slide is you don't see all those logos. That doesn't mean that agencies disappear. That means that different transit agencies work together to seamlessly make the system work conveniently for all for transit riders. And with that vision, this is something that many metropolitan areas around the world do and have done. We've done research about metropolitan areas around the world that do run a well-coordinated system. And so before the pandemic, we were working on with Assembly Member Chu on potentially having legislation to do a study on how to coordinate the system. COVID happened, bills did not go forward, but what happened was the Metropolitan Transportation Commission picked up that idea and created a blue ribbon transit recovery task force to look at how can we coordinate that system to recover from those impacts of COVID in a way that is more connected, more rider friendly, more environmentally sustainable. And this came up with 27 different actions that are moving forward, including integrated fares, integrated branding and wayfinding, integrated service, accessibility, and working at a regional level to provide funding to be able to do all of these things. So now I'm going to talk about a couple of things that are moving forward that people may be interested in, knowing what's happening and encouraging it to happen. So that transformation action plan, one of the things that it highlighted and provided funding to start doing is integrated affordable fares. So this summer in August, there's going to be a start of a pilot program for an all agency transit pass for organizations like public colleges and universities and affordable housing developments, and then moving on to employers and transportation management associations. So Mid-Penn Housing here in San Mateo County is participating in this. And what this does is Mid-Penn Housing had provided transit passes for residents, but only for Samtrans. And what this will do is it will provide residents with the ability to use Caltrain, to use BART, to use ferries, to go any place in the region. And that will help inform opportunities for all agency transit passes for employers and for individuals, which can really help increase transit ridership. Another thing that is moving forward is free transfers, which is slated to move forward in 2023 with the next generation Clipper card. So these are things that are coming forward to different transit agency boards, and you'll have the opportunity to encourage them to move forward. There is that regional consensus to be moving these things forward, but continuing to encourage them to move forward is helpful. One other important thing that I will let you know about is there is a bill in the state legislature authored by Josh Becker, who's the senator representing a good part of San Mateo County, the Seamless Transit Transformation Act. And what it does is it sets deadlines to move ahead with a number of these key items in that transformation action plan. A connected network plan for that service vision to have frequent, well-connected service, moving forward with the integrated fares, standardized wayfinding to make it really easy to use public transportation, and universal real-time information standards. This bill is going to be heard it passed out of the Senate. It's going to be in the Assembly Transportation Committee on the 27th. So this is also something that you as an individual or you as organizations that are in that you can also help to support and move forward. And I will stop sharing here, but also say that if you are excited and interested about this, we are doing our spring fundraiser. And so I can, at the right time here, also drop a link if anybody is interested in helping to advance this in addition to your support at a local and regional level if you're interested in that fundraising, funding support as well. So happy to take any questions now or at a later time.
Great, thanks Adina on that update and on seamless transportation. Let's see if we have any hands up at the moment. And I'm looking in, if there are any specific questions right now. If you have a specific question and you want to unmute yourself and ask, please feel free. Okay, and otherwise, we'll move on. Hi.
This is Bruce Nagel. Can you hear me?
Yes, hello, Bruce.
Yeah, let's see if this makes it better.
That affects all mass transit systems regardless is when there are contagious diseases around, and it obviously makes it more difficult for people to take it. I don't know if you've been able to, it's a tough nut to crack, but it seems like allowing people to feel comfortable that they're not going to get sick using transit would be a big start, because I don't think we're out of this COVID thing yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, I hear you about not being out of the COVID thing. My husband actually takes Caltrain to work every day now. And anyway, I don't know if Adina, do you want to say anything about that, or Casey?
Maybe Casey can share where the agencies are in terms of COVID safety.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Especially at the start of COVID, we took additional precautions to make sure our trains were safe for the public. And so that meant additional cleaning, upgrading the ventilation system. So we have, a better system. And then you'll also know that on Caltrain, we're not going through tunnels or anything like that. So every time you're going to a stop, you're getting fresh air from all of the doors opening up as you're going through there. And masks are highly encouraged on Caltrain. And so there's still a decent number of people that are wearing those. We haven't had any significant outbreaks that have occurred on Caltrain or Samtran. So I think as people are making their kind of risk assessment, I think that there's much more evidence at the moment pointing to things like, other spaces where people have their masks off, they're eating, they're drinking, they're gathering there than on public transit. So we understand it's still in the front of people's mind, or maybe for some people it's a little farther over, but we haven't stopped doing everything we started doing at the beginning of the pandemic to keep that safety level in place. And all of the Caltrain employees are wearing masks as well. And then the last thing I'll say on that is we're tracking kind of the public perception trends on that. And right now, I think it is a factor, but it is not the one that is keeping folks away from public transit. So we're trying to monitor that, making sure that we're pushing out the right messages to make sure people know that it is a safe environment.
Can you just speak to what your ridership numbers are now as compared to pre-pandemic?
Yeah, for Caltrain, it's been a really tremendous hit. So right now, weekdays, pre-pandemic, ridership's about 25% of what we're seeing. On the weekends, though, we're closer to 70 and 80% of the ridership. And that's what a lot of the kind of commuter railroads or BART are seeing, that people are taking on the weekends for events off peak, but that traditional commute period is not the same. On the Samtrans side, though, Samtrans is over 70% now for their ridership number. So it really is in the Bay Area that has had a slower return to office program than the rest of the country. And then the hybrid schedule has really been embraced by a lot of different companies. And so the Bay Area in particular has seen lower ridership for a lot of its transit systems.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mary?
Yes.
I've got to ask, the incredibly high gas prices, are we factoring in these gas prices and the incentive they might have for more public ridership?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
had a mini campaign of someone, saying what gas prices when we cut fares by 50% to just remind people of, another reason why public transit's important. And I think for us too, it's really the long run too. I think traffic's starting to come back on the major highways, and I think that will help push people there. But if we want to have a sustainable future and strong transit systems, we need to keep riding them.
Yeah, and one more thing that I would add to that is that in Caltrain's business plan that it did before the pandemic, there was really a vision of transforming from Caltrain's history, which is commuter rail. Commuter rail isn't a technology, it's a service pattern. It's running service really focused on the peak commute period. And what we see around the world, over the decades is that rail that runs frequent service all day long and all week long and is well connected with the rest of the service gets more ridership for all kinds of different purposes on the weekend, for the ball game, to dinner, to lunch, in addition to commuting. And that pattern, which had been part of Caltrain's vision before the pandemic, is even more important now with the change in commute patterns, and will be really enabled by the electric trains, which are able to start and stop more frequently and regularly in a way that's easy to connect to, and the regional initiatives for that integrated service and integrated fares to make it easier for people to get around, not only for peak commuting, but for a variety of other purposes.
Yeah, and if folks haven't looked at the Caltrain schedule lately, Caltrain's running the most trains that it ever has. And so it is filling in more of those midday and weekend periods. And as I kind of mentioned and Adina alluded to, when we electrify, we're going to be able to increase that service even more. And it really, the pandemic sped up some of our goals of having a more regular all-day service. We adjusted that sooner. And so now we're going to build on what we have in place now and make it even better. But it's different than what you may have remembered if it's been a few years since you've ridden Caltrain.
And Casey, to that, what you just mentioned there about more trains than ever, just a lot of most cities actually have the gates that come down, and can you just talk about that, like how the effect on the cities when the gates are down more frequently, how that's being addressed?
Sure.
Traffic backs up when the gates are down.
Yeah, so Caltrain touches, 21 different jurisdictions and 41 at-grade crossings. And so those are places where, the train and, gates and roads are right next to each other. And so as a train goes by, the gates go down to, have a safe distance from each other. But certainly then traffic can back up on either side of that. Pre-pandemic, it was the equivalent of the Bay Bridge and San Mateo Bridge volume of cars going back and forth while Caltrain's riding there. So there are efforts, there's about 20 different projects underway right now to grade separate the train from the road. And that would make it, safer for kind of all parties. What is really helpful is for the first time, the bipartisan infrastructure bill that passed at the federal level has significant dollars in place for grade separation projects. And that's been something at the federal level it really hasn't had. It's not as much as what we need on the corridor. The Caltrain business plan estimated that it would cost around $9 billion at the low end to grade separate the whole corridor. But we need to keep starting on it. And the other places, the state right now has a surplus where they're talking about a transportation package, and there may be some more dollars in there that would be going to grade separation. So it really takes a combination of different sources in place to make that ultimate goal of a grade separation project. And we just finished one last year, so it's possible. There's more in the works, but it takes a lot.
What city was that in?
San Mateo.
Oh, right, good. Yeah, we had many discussions, and I know cities up and down the corridor have many discussions on this over decades. Like you said, Casey, you've been working on this for 10 years.
Yeah, and an interesting fact is there actually are more grade separated areas than not along the Caltrain corridor, but Caltrain's been around for 150 years, and a lot of those happened a long time ago.
Yes, yeah, well, good. Well, thank you. I know we'll have more questions, and I'm excited about them. It's 6:09, and we'd love to get to our final speaker as well. And Christine, perhaps you can put that slide up. And we're excited to have Antoine as our next speaker here. So thank you. Antoine is the lead North America at Fairtick. Prior to joining the company, he spent 10 years at Metrolinx, the Toronto Region's transit authority, in roles in innovation, sustainability, long-range planning, and customer and fare experience. He's from Switzerland. He's a registered professional planner and has degrees in business and planning from Canada and in sustainable development from Sweden. And we are very honored to have you here this evening. Thank you so much for enlightening us with your knowledge.
Thank you so much. I hope that you can all see my screen.
Yes.
Today, I want to take you on a bit of a journey about transit again, since that's the theme tonight, but focusing on the customer experience and how to bring riders back. So these are figures for the Toronto area, but they're quite representative of what has been seen in many cities, I would say, around the Western world. Ridership basically collapsed during the pandemic, and it has been quite slow to come back up. And we heard that from Casey, with some differences depending on what kind of publics the transit system serves and the type of area and how dependent local people are on the transit service. What happened at the same time is that we've seen a bounce back of traffic that has been quite a bit faster than transit. So it's not that there is no transportation demand, it's that people who were taking transit are no longer taking transit for a whole host of reasons. So we need to really understand what is going on to get people back. When we ask people whether they want to go back to the office, a lot of them say that their preference is not to return to the office every day. So it means that even though we will gradually go back to a physical presence at the office, the ridership that we had from daily commuters is basically gone. We will probably never go back to everybody going back to the office 5 days a week. So that means that until population growth catches up, we will need to come up with new ways to get people back onto the transit system to make all the good business cases fulfill their promises and make sure that these investments that we are making are worthwhile. The composition or the makeup of customers has changed as well. So it's not like the population has changed necessarily. It's that because of the nature of the economy and the work environment, the makeup of customers has changed. So an example in Philadelphia, and there's no reason why it wouldn't be similar in other cities around the continent, is that the proportion of females taking transit went from 60 to 70%. And again, it is a reminder for all gentlemen out there involved in the transportation industry that you need to make space for women, because the customers that you serve are very predominantly women. And I can share with you that I was at a conference recently and there were still some manuals. You have 5 men, very often white men, talking about transportation and transit. And so of course they bring their perspective, but a very important voice is missing at the table. Also in Philadelphia still, 48 to 55% African Americans, and from 33 to 44% low income. And so it's really important to serve these populations because they're usually people we depend on to run the economy. They're frontline workers. And that's why I put this really amazing quote by Tamika Butler, who's a well-known activist. And she says we have to get out of a mindset where there are only certain people who are transit dependent, because we are all dependent on the people who are transit dependent. So we're all transit dependent. Feel free to reuse it and share it with your local elected officials. So looking at the makeup of customers, I like to break it down into 3 groups. The first one is the most faithful customers. These are the ones who never left. They're the frontline workers, the people who cannot work from home. And we absolutely need to not forget about their needs. We need to make sure that transit systems serve them and take them where they need to go. And it's really incredible. I heard about a city out east where the transit agency is still removing the effects of redlining. So they're still redesigning the network to remove the effects of redlining, basically designing transit routes to prevent African Americans from accessing other areas. Then we have lapsed customers, and these are the ones who would have been daily commuters or would have been taking transit for leisure purposes. And they, for some reason, stopped taking transit. And then we have the vast majority of the population in North America, which I call the transit shy. And these are the ones we have to make a very particular effort to bring to transit, again, to make up for the numbers that we lost. So our business is fare collection, so paying for transit, and very often transit agencies see it as a kind of an afterthought. You just put in the IT department, tell them go and source some way for customers to pay for transit. But in fact, what I want to say today is that it's a really integral part of the customer experience. So because paying for transit was so difficult in Switzerland and so complicated, because it's a very complicated, dense system, our founder came up with a system that would work everywhere in Switzerland. You could basically start your trip with our application anywhere in the country, like here in Zurich, or here in Fribourg, or here in Lausanne. And these were to encourage you to visit Switzerland and actually ride the Stadler trains that you will soon get with Caltrain. They're already in operation there. And so what we did is an application that just gives you a green button where you check in. And then when you're done with your trip, you check out. And so you can imagine that in an environment that Adina described that's fragmented like the Bay Area, it would allow you to completely ignore who the service provider is and just check in and check out and get immediate feedback on your phone about origin, destination, and the cost of the trip. We've leveraged our technology, but also our expertise in transit fares and transit pricing to work with transit agencies to design very new type of fares, specifically designed to bring people to transit. On the left-hand side, you have an example in the region of Occitanie in France, where they designed a program with 50% off for 1 to 5 returns, then giving them the rest of the month free, and then giving them actual credits that they can use for transit the following month. And that's resulted in the number of riders and the 26 to rise by 35%. In the neighboring region, Nouvelle-Aquitaine, they created a program to bring commuters back to transit. So instead of forcing them to choose to buy a pass at the beginning of the month, when a lot of people don't know how many times they'll come back to the office, they basically put the whole menu out there, but the system automatically prices the basket of trips that the person took based on their actual consumption. So there's no fear of overpaying at the beginning of the month. In the largest region, most populous region in Germany, we worked with the government there to come up with a system that would allow local authorities to keep their autonomy. And so we combined distance-based fares with a per mile rate that was determined by each authority and daily caps that would prevent people from overpaying for their transit. So it was a way to bring predictability to users while keeping the local autonomy. We have a real treasure in that we know who is using the application. We know their email address and their phone number. And so we have really broken down the phase of their experience. First, we need to bring people to transit. We need to bring people to the app. Then we need to make sure that they use it once they've downloaded it. Then we need to increase their activity. And then if they lapse after 28 days, we need to go back and bring them back to transit. You might be familiar with this when with every retailer and service provider out there, but transit has traditionally not done that. So here is an example of a letter campaign that we sent with the same body in the email that we sent to everyone, and then 6 different messages, including competition between riders, 2 types of lotteries, offering to plant a tree on behalf of the rider, and hard cash, a $5 voucher. And we found that there was actually a very significant statistical difference, which shows you that ridership is actually quite malleable. And with the right campaigns, you can actually go and get people to ride transit. And you notice here, no mail, that means people are not reached out to. And the most successful one was plant a tree. So people are most sensitive to that argument. And that resulted in higher revenues for the transit agency. We also work directly with employers to bring employees to the work sites with, for example, here, free transit between the 3 sites of the company and a €50, $50 benefit monthly for employee for personal travel. In this instance, we also worked with a city that wanted to encourage transit to its Christmas market, providing free transit to 2 stops around the market. So again, really creating compelling use cases and a really easy experience for people to ride for free, not having to figure out how much to pay for transit or not having to get special tickets that might be complicated to obtain. So we found overall that 29% of users of our application were very rare or actually non-users of transit. And in a survey, we found that about 1/3 of users said that the app encouraged them to take transit, which again demonstrates that with the right messaging, the right promotions, you can actually get people to ride more. And that's really my message, is that ridership is not a fatality. It's not static. With the right campaigns, the right messages, in addition to, of course, the right policies that Adina talked about and the right infrastructure and services that Casey talked about, the last layer is really the customer relationship to actually get people to take transit. Thank you very much. That was it.
Thank you so much. I just downloaded your app and to look at it, and it's only in Europe. Is that right?
It is right now only in the countries I would say around Switzerland. So that's a very good reason for you to get there.
And is the company proposing to do this in other regions now?
Yeah, so I was hired to not only explore opportunities in the US and Canada, but I'm also helping the team look at the countries that would be most ready to welcome that type of technology. So for example, in the last 2 weeks, I was talking to agencies in Portugal and Poland.
Okay, interesting. And where does the US fall on that scale of most ready?
I think it's really about finding the right agency that is really to try something new, because it really turns the model on its head. Agencies are very used to having users pay in advance for transit or load a wallet and pre-sell products like passes. So there is movement in the US and Canada to go towards what is called capping, which means you ride to a certain amount of money and then you ride for free, which is equivalent to a pass, but it's a pass that basically adapts to you instead of you adapting to your pass. But it's a conservative industry. And so it takes a lot of conversations. I think my colleagues told me that it took 2 to 3 years to enter Germany, which is the market most similar to Switzerland and adjacent to it. So we're being very patient.
Interesting. That's very fascinating. Hopefully you'll talk to maybe you already have organizations like that, the City and County Association of Governments in our county, which deals with a lot of transportation issues around the county.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. And let's see. It's 6:24, so we have 6 minutes, and we'd love to take a couple of questions. And Adina, I see your hand up. Is there something you want to share with us?
Yeah, which is a connection between what I was talking about and what Antoine was, which is that pilot that I talked about, the all agency transit pass pilot. One of the goals of that pilot over 2 years is to explore opportunities to have individual fare products, including potentially a cap. And so that would be like a really complementary direction. And I am wondering whether there might be opportunities to move even faster than the couple of years on that pilot to be able to go in this great direction.
Well, I know that if you were wondering about that, you are the right woman to explore that and find the right people to bring that point to. So we'll have to have a conversation in, I don't know, 6 months and hear what the update is. Thanks for that comment. And Mark, I see that your hand's up. Is there a comment that you have too? Or whatever, comment or question, whatever. Oh, and I think you might be muted. I don't think we hear you.
Are you talking
Right,
to
I
me?
was muted.
Yeah, hello.
Oh, it's different, Mark. Good.
Oh, sorry, Mark Bolton, we'll come to you next if you'd like.
It is a comment.
Okay, hello.
And there is a fairly lengthy entry in the chat, but not everyone's going to see it unless I mention it. So what I'm proposing is that the ideal ribs and the ribs on the main line and the feeders into the routes off to the side, especially into the communities that I saw were low-income communities touching at one end against the rail, but not mostly away from it. And that is group rapid transit, bidirectional, ultralight, elevated group rapid transit. And it can be done less expensively than people would expect, considerably. And what I really like is the idea of building a stack using an ultra high strength structural geometry called the Bosch captive column and composites. So you have above the signals, so they don't have to stop for traffic lights and stop signs, you have the group rapid transit. And above that, you have fast and slow bicycles going both directions. Above that, you have pedestrians and you have miscellaneous mobility devices like scooters and skateboards and whatever. And above that, you've got a high efficiency solar canopy. And we're aiming for 50% efficiency, which is twice the best you can find today. That solar canopy would power the group rapid transit, would power the charging places at rest stops along the way, and it would even feed some of the neighborhood
So
around
it
the
sounds
sides.
like what you're talking about is something that is elevated above the
Yes,
track.
absolutely elevated, which
Yeah.
means that you riding it or walking it, you are above the city, you're above the traffic, and you're safe, you're completely safe from being hit by a motor vehicle. And you can actually look out at the trees, at the urban forest and the hills beyond, and really breathe clean air and be really enjoying yourself.
Well, thanks for bringing that idea up. It's always good to hear all sorts of ideas. I remember when I was on city council, when a similar idea came up, there was a lot of pushback about privacy issues. But I think it's important to talk about
Is
all
that
these
Mountain
ideas.
View? I remember
No.
that discussion. I heard that discussion. I heard some of
It
that.
could be X city. It could be in any number of cities.
Yeah. Well, the
but
thing on the privacy issue is you can set it up so people don't really see straight down into people's yards. And the other thing is people ignore people who are, you're looking at the skyline. You're not looking down at people's yards. You're looking at the view.
Yes. Yeah. Well,
Mark
thank you.
Milton.
Yeah. Great idea. And Michael.
Mark Milton's got his hand up.
Well, I also see a hand up. Mark, we'll go to you. Why don't we do real quickly, and then we can go to Michael as well. Hello, Mark.
Thanks. I have a quick one for Antoine. Have you worked on the last mile problem with your system? So can you integrate the equivalent of Uber or something like that?
We have found that there's enough work still for us to do in conventional transit. So it's very much on our radar, but for the moment, we are focusing on improving the solution, continuing to improve the solution for conventional transit. But yes, you're not the first to mention it for sure.
Great question. And then Michael, I think it's Swire, if you have a quick question, we're at 6:29, and then I'll pass it back to Christine for closing.
Sure. Thanks to all the speakers. That was great. And these are some great ideas, I think, for reducing a lot of the friction, especially for transport riders. My question is, how much can we really move the needle in terms of the total mix of people taking transit as opposed to autos, when, you know, autos kind of the de facto mode of transit for everybody? It's very hard to live in the Bay Area outside of urban areas without a car. You know, we've got the COVID thing that's got to rectify itself, but then we also have public policy that simply continues to make driving a car easier. I mean, we're widening Highway 101 with $600 million spent, and that's just going to make it easier for people to drive. And I'm just really worried that even as we make transit easier, we're continuing to make driving easier, and it's a zero-sum gain, honestly. I mean, the harder it is, the easier it is to drive, the fewer people that will get on transit.
Casey, do you want to respond to that?
I think if I kind of got the gist of your question is, you know, how are we going to get more people on transit, and kind of what's the part of the pie that we can hope to have in the future? And I do think the two other speakers make very valid points, and we need to make transit as easy as driving a car. And it doesn't matter what the transit system is, and it doesn't matter how the connections are, but once it becomes as easy as getting in your car, then, you know, that number can really increase. And so we need to keep doing our part to see how big we can get it. And certainly there are places around the world where they're doing it better. And we have a great room for improvement. So I don't think I could tell you exactly what that number is. I think it's a lot higher than what it is today. And certainly we kind of took a step or two backwards with the pandemic. And so we need to, you know, as we're coming back, make sure that we're building a system that, you know, is even better than the one that was there before. So I kind of leave it as that without maybe a direct answer on. the number.
Well, it is a philosophical debate, so I think that is a great response, and I appreciate it. If we had more time, we'd keep going, but it's 6:32, and we're always trying to be mindful to say thank you so much for being here. And Christine, I'll let you close it, and thanks.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. And I just wanted to give a big round of applause to all our speakers. I think we had like a multifaceted approach to, what needs to be done and what can be done so that in 10 years, or perhaps even a little bit before, public transportation will be well beloved, well utilized, and is basically people's preferred way of moving around. And hopefully we'll get there. Thank you all for your active participation. And please do save the date. We have our July happy hour is going to look at the intersection of the arts and the power to move us to become a more sustainable community. So I hope you can join us. I added the link. It's not active yet, but we will make it active by the end of the week. So save the date. Again, thank you so much. Thank you also to our board members, everyone. Hope to see you again next time, and let's just continue to move forward. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.